Hey, how are you doing?
Hi.
Hey, everyone.
In case you've not seen, Hugh says he's going to be a little bit late.
So it's all of us, right? Without Hugh said he will be late, right? So we can basically start. Or we're waiting somebody else and Hugh.
Michael accepted the invite. Maybe we'll just give it one more minute for him and then get started. All right, yeah, why don't we get started? Yvonne, you just posted a proposal. Do you want to walk everyone through that?
You're mute, Ivan.
Yeah, so you see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like bad that I cannot like uncollapse it. It's GitHub like make it scrollable. But basically idea is actually like I discussed this proposal previously, and that's when it's like further iteration on this solution. But basic idea, what if we say like, I will first try to explain like idea behind it, and then like the whole payload, the whole like shape of payload. Idea is that right now we do initial response and one response and one additional payload per path. And you need to do in order to get like full data, because data fields deduplicated between initial response and deferred part, you need to do match anyway. So clients need to implement like matching anyway. So code is already there, price is paid. Why we should stick to only one payload per path? What if we allow clients to send multiple payloads per path and use a completed field, which we want to use for stream anyway? with the same semantic. So what happening here? So in tricky example B, ABCD, it's easy part. So it shipped in initial response. So yeah, it shipped here. When we go to a tricky part and we have like E and F that shared between two of them, and so potentially swap field, and G and H potentially swap field. B is not shared. So we have like three sets of fields. In inquiry, we have two sets of fields, but we have intersection. What if server smart enough to figure out like server can do two strategies. Server can send like fields as fast as they resolved, or server can be smart and, for example, like calculate this intersection. I don't know what's more efficient and what we strive for, but it doesn't influence the proposal here. So proposal here is like, for example, all the stuff is slow, as name of field suggests. So after initial payload, E and F resolved. So in current proposal, we cannot do anything until like at least one of slow fields resolved, and only when we ship something. But here, what if we can supply multiple payload? It's mean like we send EF. Next question, under which path should we send EF? Under path AB or under path under root path? And after thinking about it, root path wins. It's the same semantic as we do like for field matching. Basically, like outer scope always win. So we ship EF under incremental with like empty path, and we ship EF. Nothing is completed here. Like this path is not completed. We just ship part of it. This part should be matched with the initial response. When suppose like order can be different, but for this example, suppose field A resolved first. So we shipped it under path AB, under basically with defer, because it doesn't use in any other defers. So we shipped potentially slow field A under A and B, and we mark it as completed because previous payload like solved it. So like missing part. And last thing, we still have GH and potentially slow field B. And we shipped it under like root path, and we also mark it complete because everything is resolved. One thing I was like trying to rush and make it fast, I put it on the incremental, all the three payloads on the same incremental. Just imagine, I will correct my comment, just imagine it's like three different payloads. Here is my like basic proposal, and I can do screen sharing, stop screen sharing. So.
Do you think, is this like a deterministic algorithm that you would always get this response shape for this, or could servers break apart defers in any way they see fit and send one field at a time or something like that?
Here, like I'm like doesn't finalize on should we do like deterministic algorithm, or should we allow server to break stuff? One thing clears, it's like common part either should be like, it should not be like interlock, as we discussed with Michael previously. So like implementation should be able to send it stuff that is ready and is common part of the stuff. So maybe I'm like for allowing server to do what server wants. If server wants to ship it like separate fields, it can ship separate fields. If we decide it's problematic, we can change it to like deterministic order. Key question here is like the only rule is top level wins, which is the same. It's like it's the same rule as we have like with initial response. So and it's logic, kind of present logic. But on the same level, which fields are sent like you can do potentially slow field A first and one potentially slow field B and vice versa. We don't know. It's like it's unpredictable on runtime which field is slowest of two. Did I answer your question, Rob?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and it's not a final, just like food for thought, so we can still like iterate on it. It's like, yeah. Benji, you have the question.
Yeah, I'm trying to work out what the value is of the completed. It doesn't seem to correlate really with the fragments themselves. So
path.
Right, yeah, it tells you that the path is completed, but I don't understand why that is useful. What is the use case for that? What's the value that we're getting from informing us that?
We can basically, it's related to issue we discussed with Benoit. So in code generation, you need to know when particular fragment is resolved or not. Like if you have enough data for particular fragment, technically you can check like presence of fields, but it's hard, especially like in current proposal when you can like, for example, path AB is very tricky because you don't ship all the data under path AB. You ship like stuff without query analysis or without implementing this algorithm in a client and without checking like fields inside payload. You cannot determine when you have enough data for particular fragment. You cannot determine if you will have more data for this particular path.
Right, but this doesn't necessarily solve that because it doesn't relate to fragments, it relates to paths. So if you take your example and the problematic query, the bottom defer that's at the root level, if you imagine that as just a fragment and we want to know when that's completed, you could, if you take your incremental responses that you've put and, as you say, split them up into separate incrementals as you described before, if you swap the order of the second and third payloads in that incremental, then after the second payload, that fragment is complete, but there is no information to the client telling them that fragment that you requested is complete. That will never be seen as complete until the entire query is complete with what is currently proposed, right? Because the root level path is not complete. So that's why I'm struggling to see what the actual value of knowing that a path is complete is, because it doesn't tie in specifically to the fragments, which we may want to know more about.
Yeah, so to explain, it's tricky semantic, trickier when, so it's not like object are recursively complete. This is like, as you said, like it's not there. But it's mean like all the defer defined that under this path is completed. It's mean like you can still have defer under under like subfields unresolved, but on this level, all the differs are resolved. So like, yeah, I need to describe it more clearly.
Okay, I think I see what you're saying. So what you're saying is after, in my scenario where you take those second and third payloads and you reverse them, on the second one, it is still completed because that defer that was in the root payload is completed.
Yeah, all the differ inside the root level.
Okay, and then it's up to the client to then say, oh, there are no other differs within that fragment, and therefore the fragment must be complete.
Or in case of Benoit, since we, because we remove labels, I have proposal of how to reinstate label, kind of label, and how to have Benoit with labels. And but it's separate one. I decided to split it up because it's independent. But currently, since we do merging of a stuff, you cannot complete fields independently, complete fragments independently. So Benoit just waits for until he gets everything on a level and say, like, if we receive everything, we can fulfill all the fragments. To communicate to a client that particular fragment is resolved, I have like another proposal I'm working on. So yeah, this one is separate.
Ivan?
Yeah.
So I see like the main two features in this proposal are being I would say that there's no duplication of fields, and we also are sending payloads as they're ready. Do you see those as I guess those are two separate things. In theory, we could be sending payloads as they're ready and still allow servers to duplicate fields. I don't know why we would do that, but I don't know why we would advocate for that. But basically what I'm getting at is I'm wondering if this feature is something that we could enable as like an argument or like optional smarter behavior, later than the the initial release, sort of like how we said that we could potentially allow streamed items to be sent out of order, maybe at some future date, with like a directive argument that explicitly allows it. And so on the defer, it would say, something like send when ready as an argument. And if that was sent to true, you would have this behavior. And if that was set to false, it would, everything would, would have to be held until it's ready. And then I guess there wouldn't be a use for a completed field, and you would see, like, if that's absent, you would assume, that it is completed, or maybe you would change completed to like something like, not completed, something to get the behavior semantics right. But the basic idea is, it sounds like this is something that might be useful, but it might not necessarily be necessary for the initial release. So just wondering what you think about that.
Yeah, so like in case of stream and out of order stuff, we need to learn like if people really need that or not. In this case, like duplication of the fields, especially like, sorry, do you hear me, right? My electricity went down. Yeah, so here, but you cannot see me. And yeah, it's good investment, optical fiber. Every time I'm happy and recommend to everybody. It's work without electricity. So yeah, and I will probably disable my camera because it doesn't make sense. So in here, like use case is clear. It's like deduplication, and it's like, for me, it's basic premise of GraphQL. We ship like only data that you need. and it's like motto of GraphQL. And when we suddenly do duplication, it depends on complexity. If complexity is small, and it's like, after speaking with Benoit, I understood like key things that make me, I had this idea for a long time, but what triggered me is that talking with Benoit, you need to do margin anywhere in the client. It's not like client need to implement something new for this proposal, because we already decide to do deduplication with initial response. Clients already need to do magic. So for client,
I'm not sure, Ivan, if everyone agrees that we have to do deduplication of the initial response. I'm actually not sure that that's the case. And I worked on the PR for the spec, and the feedback that I got was that we should take all deduplication out of that initial spec PR. So that's what, allowing it. But not.
Okay. So in this case,
sorry,
would
argue... Ivan, let me correct myself. That's actually not, now I'm remembering. The feedback I got was that deduplication should be allowed. So that actually, if it's allowed by the server, then the client has to expect a potentially deduplicated response. So that, so I guess, so I guess I guess you're right. I'm sorry. I guess you're right. We would have to do, the client may expect a deduplicated response.
Yeah, so if we have like deduplication between initial response and defer, so like complexity is there, code is there, Benoit, how it's required for clients to do like patching. It's required you to merge to JSON in some form, not literally JSON, but some representation of JSON to merge it together. And it's already implemented. As a benefit, we will receive deduplication, and we receive like potentially server can like fulfill certain fragment faster. And it's what it's based on my second proposal of returning a label in different form. But yeah, like if I return labels, and in that case, we receive like stuff can be like fulfilled faster than.
Right. But the reason why I give the analogy to stream is that, let's say, right now we have to deliver streamed items in order. And let's say the last streamed item in a very long list is slow. Sorry, the first streamed item in a very long list is slow, but everything else has been completed. So that means that we have to wait potentially, I don't know, an hour, 5 minutes, some really long time to even start streaming the lists. It would be nice if we could stream the items that are ready, as soon as they are, because, ready, because then, the whole response would get there faster. So there's an argument for that. And similarly here, we have an argument, if you have a part of a response that's ready, why not just send it, as soon as it's ready? And then we'll signal to the client when the whole thing is complete. And it's, it's a similar argument, that, you should never, let the wire be empty. We should always be sending something. But, it's possible that clients, may prefer to, not to do that, potentially, or just that might be a feature that we could add later. In terms of deduplication, I agree that I guess would be ideal. And, if we can find an algorithm to do it cheaply, maybe we should do it. But I'm just wondering, meaning if these are like, to me, these are extra features on our stream. We have a data stream. Could we make it deduplicated? Could we allow, to unlock sending parts of it as soon as they're ready? I'm just wondering if we could, you know, make these things opt in, or at least not delay the initial release of these features, you know, for these advanced, sorry, of all of incremental delivery for these advanced features.
Yeah, so my proposal is like that. I treat it as not as a feature but refinement, but core idea, it's organizational now. It's not technical, but your question is organizational. There is like this methodology called Shape Up. I really like it. I didn't finish the book, but basic idea, you say how much time you okay to dedicate to a feature. It's not like you're doing feature to the end. It's like you say, this feature is worth like 1 week of my time. If I cannot do it by 1 week, let's drop it. So I'm like have the same idea about this thing. So if I cannot like create concrete proposal and implementation in time frame, and we discussed it last time until the next working group, it's too complex to do now, and we can figure out how to either enable it later or like totally forget about it. So I'm also for cutting features, but I'm treated as like refinement and not a feature of stuff that we try to do. And second thing, I want to non-block, not to block progress. And progress, the earliest point that we can have progress is next working group, main working group. So if until that we'll have like working proposal and everybody agrees it makes sense, why not to go with it as in initial release?
Okay, I mean, I guess then the question would be: are there any downsides of sending data?
Yeah, you're right.
Is there a
Technical
client that
downside
might not want this feature? And I think, you know, I can't speak to everything, but I mean, here we have, you know, basically you're going to be doing those merges every time you receive a deferred frag. You know, sorry, with the current implementation, you're going to be doing the merges every time you receive a completed fragment. You're going to have to merge an additional tree. So now, you know, if you send incomplete data, you will have to do more. You know, those merges will be spread out, but I don't think it should be really spread out in time. But because you're merging subtrees, I don't really think it has like a complexity. You know, I don't think it's really has an additional like complexity cost for the client. So I don't think that's an issue. I guess one issue would be is like, you know, if you want to use the wire for something else, and the client for some reason doesn't want, you know, data until it's ready for some reason, you know, because they're in the middle of some other, you know, activity. But I mean, so that's I guess the question: is there some client that might not want this feature? And honestly, I don't but I mean, I don't have a clear answer on that, but I guess that's what we would have to define.
Yeah, I mean, the only yeah, sorry, the only it's a trade-off of we're making the response like a little bit more complicated to understand, where it's not just you get a payload back and now you know that deferral from that path is complete. But yeah, I think that's the main trade-off, right? And I guess I can't think of another reason why a client would be against it other than it's slightly more work.
There is one small thing, and I will add comment about it. Client so previously client needed to do merges only on particular path, saying like you need to get, imagine like Benji proposal of pending is implemented. So client, really advanced clients that want to really save resources and very like in small way, but still optimization. Client can, when he receives pending, it can get like attach parts of JSON, initial JSON to IDs and track mergers on those. And technically, if client decide to like maintain with separate copies of initial response separately, not shared, but separately, it can be a problem because in my example, top level stuff for fields like inner fragment is fulfilled partly by stuff sent from for top fragment on the top path. So basically, the only like real thing, you need to track changes on the same tree. You cannot track changes independently per path. But I don't see like big benefits on trying to maintain changes per path. Like idea that defer is short-lived, so it's not like it's not subscription, it's not living for like long time. So optimize in memory, making your client complicated to optimize, share like a little bit of memory. I don't see it as like big benefit and somebody actually implementing it, but it's there. So shorter version, you need to track changes on the global, on like one response tree. You cannot track changes per fragment on separate per fragment trees.
Have you tried implementing this on the server, or do you have like an idea of how it would be implemented?
It's like last week I discussed it with Yakov and with Benoit, and since then it's like third iteration. This one is super simple, but I came to it today, so I didn't have the chance to implement it. And please think about it. Maybe I'm like missing something, and there is like corner cases after it. But I'm like, so in theory, it should work, but I have no idea how to implement it or how hard it would be to implement it. So I plan to work it, or maybe we can work together with Yakov if Yakov wants to help, because experimenting a lot in this field. So not yet, but I don't think it would be super complicated implementation.
Okay, yeah, I guess we should try to implement it to make sure that there's nothing that we're missing and that it is straightforward to implement and to put in the spec.
Next small question I wanted to ask. I wanted actually to write it, but yeah, I didn't have enough time today. Idea is that what if instead of labels, we can use fragment names plus path? What I realized we don't need to, like, if you don't care about naming your inline fragment, like in most cases, CodeGen and other stuff don't care about inline fragments, but they care about named fragment, at least like from Benoit implementation, in the sense that Benoit cares about fragment with names, and I assume similar clients that do code generation or stuff care about deferred fragments with names. And what's unique is that fragment name plus path is unique combination. So, you know, for sure, even if fragment is reused inside other fragment, you still know, like, if you have enough data to fulfill this fragment or not. So ideas here is to have like fulfilled fragments and write like names of fragments that was fulfilled by particular payload, even if complete is false. So imagine you ship like some fields on this level and say like fulfilled fragments and list the name of fulfilled fragments, or only one of them. So what do you think about better solution for tracking individual fragments? I deliberately wanted to make it separate from previous proposal, but previous proposal enables us tracking fulfilled names of fulfilled fragments on particular path.
That's an interesting idea. We've talked before about how if we go with the named fragments approach, then the fragment name will effectively become part of the path anyway. But what you're proposing here is forget that. Instead, take the path and the name of the fragment and just say, at this path, these list of fragments have been completed, the alternative take. Now, I quite like that. It seems simple at first, but I am concerned that it would balloon the response size, especially for clients like Relay that use fragments for every single individual like React component in the entire tree. The number of fragments that you're going to see in a response could be quite high, and normally those fragments would just evaporate, like they got rid of by field merging. So actually having to dictate each single one of those that is now present in the response, that's a lot of extra data to send through, especially if you have like nested lists. You can imagine easily times the number of fragments you're using by 100, because there's a list of 10 things with a list of 10 things inside of that, and suddenly that's a lot of information. I wonder if we could solve it more specifically by like opting certain fragments into it, so only certain fragments are actually like monitored in this way, or whether there's another way to reduce this potential large increase. Good idea though, really interesting.
Would it only be fragments that have a defer directive on them that you're doing this for?
Yeah, only stuff that have deferred. Yeah, because it's not in data. It's like fulfilled fragments. I was thinking about adding it top level together with path or like ID or like whatever field we add beyond beside data. We can add like fulfilled fragment names. So idea was to add it there and to work only for deferred stuff.
So if you were to do a bunch of named fragment spreads inside of a unnamed fragment spread, an inline fragment that was deferred, then you wouldn't get any labels out of that. But yeah, how would you then know that that inline fragment was now complete? I guess the path that you've proposed here would imply that it is now complete.
Yeah, a path would imply that it's complete. But so like idea is that clients, like people writing web applications, if you want to get separate notification saying part of your response is fulfilled, and you want to have like separate part of your response from another separate part of your response that you want to be deferred, you can do it as a name fragment. I would argue you should do it as a name fragment because it will make code generation easier and everything else easier. Like fragments was added to do like a set of field for code generation initially inside Facebook. So it's like fragments are type system on a client, not on the server. So in this semantic, if you want to have separate as a person programmer who do web application and use like Relay, Apollo, or any other client, if you want to have special treatment for this set of deferred fields, you need to put it in in a named fragment, and you would get a special treatment, either like special like callback or special notification or separate API or like stuff in generated code. So I would say if you do deferred fragments, deferred inline fragment and inside named fragments, it's mean like you don't care about deferred part. You don't, as a person who writes query, you said like, yeah, I want it to be deferred, but I don't want it to have like special be specially treated, and I don't want to have like separate like callback or separate notification for it. And if I want separate notification, I want to use name fragment, and I want to use like a name of a fragment as like notification or like yeah. So idea is that client person who writing queries can show his intention by either like saying inline fragments and everything is batched up until like everything on this path is resolved, or if he wants special treatment, he do named fragments.
So before we said that fragments at the same path would be merged, I guess once we said that they would be merged, the benefit, the trade-off that we made was that if you had two deferred fragments at the same path, then they're no longer independent of each other, depending on which one is faster or slower. Maybe they're tied to unrelated components, and one would be able to render before the other. Does the server need to like keep better track of all the fields in each fragment to do this? Or is it still the situation where it's just resolving them all together, and now it's just telling you that both of these fragments are complete at the same time, and then you don't really have the benefit of them being independent?
Yeah, so I thought about that, and server usually in most of implementation, at least in the reference implementation, and I think most of implementation don't have a control. You cannot say like, please resolve this thing faster and this thing slower. You just start everything, and whatever resolved first, you get the data. So question, since we cannot prioritize things, and in most systems, we cannot prioritize things. So you have two options. You can ship as you resolve. So stuff is resolved and immediately shipped, or you can batch it until it's meaningful. So you can batch stuff until you get at least like one named fragment fulfilled, or all the stuff per path fulfilled. Should you do this like batching or not? I'm not sure. It's dependent on how complex it would be. So if it would be in implementation wise or algorithm wise, if it would be easy to track that to not send stuff and track until like meaningful part of it is done. So like named fragment is done. So at least one named fragment is done. And when ship it, yeah, it can be nice optimization. If not, server can ship whatever is resolved until next tick. So like you get all the data and wait a tick and ship whatever was resolved on previous tick.
Ivan, just on the question of using the fragment name, I would say that I don't feel so strongly about it, but I think it's just a different feature. Like I would say that we're okay, just using a label, instead of making the label the fragment name and tying it to whether you're doing it inline or not, we can we can just go with the regular label as it was before. I mean, again, I don't feel so strongly about it, but I think it might make sense to even require not even to require, but I'm not sure I understand why it would be better to limit us in that way and making it so that you can apply this to inline fragments, that this differentiability.
Actually, like okay with both. I'm just thought that label is contradicting like alias fragments in some way. So that's why I thought like it will raise some concerns that why we need stuff, why we need to add new name to fragment if in future we will have alias fragments. So that's why I thought like just using fragment name is better, but I don't feel strong about that. My main idea that if with previous proposal of allowing you to send incomplete payloads is accepted, it will basically enable us to have like labels in some form, because problem with the labels previously was that label is attached to a specific form. So you would say like, if you receive this label, this payload should include this data, even if this data is part of this data is already duplicated somewhere. So think my previous proposal that we discussed previously enable us to not tie labels to a shape and allow us to just signalize where you have enough data in merged JSON tree to fulfill particular fragment, inline fragment, or whatever. So yeah, I basically like answer to the question is Occam Razor. I didn't want to create new entities since we already have a fragment names. I didn't want to add like new thing, and especially since we have like kind of competing thing in form of aliased fragments.
Yeah, so that would it's something that could be done like entirely on top of deferred stream if we do go with your proposal, right?
Yeah. Just one argument. I'm okay with for this particular feature. I'm okay to delay it if nothing like nobody thinks strong about it, because it's like this second proposal about fragment names. It's like clear feature, and it can be done incrementally. Why I wanted to voice it up, because I think it give like more pros to previous proposal, because it show like a path to enable that. And because with current state where we partly deduplicating stuff, adding like labels in a mess, it would be complicated.
Yeah, got it. Could you leave a comment like under your proposal on this issue with that?
Okay,
yeah.
And I will edit example to show like separate responses instead of one incremental. And I will write this comment about client, the client need to track changes now in one tree.
And that's just under, just so I understand, it's this is saying this is something that we could do in the future if we go in this direction now.
Yeah.
And it's something that we could weigh against fragment aliases, or maybe it makes sense to have both, or one or the other, or something like that. But yeah, so I think
I'm not sure that that's the case, that we could choose to do it later. With the labels, we could introduce labels later, right? They don't exist, no one uses them, and therefore when we start to use them, it's a new behavior. But it sounds to me like what Ivan is proposing is, if you do a defer on a named fragment spread, then at some later point, we can tell you, oh, that defer is complete. But that means that no client will ever be able, if we don't implement that from the start, no client can ever rely on that behavior, that's going to come through, because originally we didn't mandate that was the case. So I think it would, if we were to go that route, and it sounds interesting. I think we would need to introduce it from the start. Otherwise, clients can't rely on the fact that they will be getting those confirmations come through. Or I may have misunderstood something.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Like with labels, with labels, it's like clear addition. If it's like feature flag, if defer have a label, you can rely on this behavior. But with fragment names, I still think like to solve your point about not duplicating fragment names, we need like some mechanism. We need either Boolean flag on defer itself, or we need like stuff in pending. So I think, because like as you said, we cannot push like fragment names inside every item of list and repeat it many more times. We need like some other stuff. We either need to mark a fragment, in which case it's similar to label. So if you're able to mark fragment, it means like you can rely on it, or we need to do like is a pending style, or like stuff in the pending when we list fragments and use like numbers. So like I will need to formulate a better proposal to solve issues that you raised. And as part of this proposal, I think it will be a mechanism that allow client to rely on this stuff if it's added later. Anyway, like we need to figure out the proposals that solve your issue with list and duplicated names. So that proposal would be a little bit more complex to solve that.
Can I ask you some other questions about this? One is with the original labels, right? The idea behind them was that you could then say, I want this bit done and I want this bit done, and I don't care which of them comes in first, but I want them to come in as soon as they're ready. And then for a while, we proposed that actually at the same layer, we'll just merge all the defers together. So both of those would wait, and then you'd get them both to come through at the same time. Now, what you're proposing is effectively going back to the old behavior, but without the structural aspect of it. So now you can get fields from each of them as and when they're ready. And then at some point it will say, this one's finished. And at another point it will say, this one's finished, which sounds ideal. But it would still, I guess, be acceptable for the server to treat it as if it were this middle state where we just send them both at the same time. There's no specification level, you must send these two things separately anymore. Like, we can send them all at once if the server deems that that's more appropriate. Is that correct, would you say?
So in current, on the same level, right? You're right. If it's on the same level, if it's on the different levels, you need to do the duplication. Example B that I showed as part of when I did screen sharing, we go through example B, and it's the only case where you force to ship stuff separately. So in example B from that issue, you must ship incomplete objects. In all other cases, you can ship incomplete objects.
I think I'd need to see that worked up. I'm interested to know if we could have like a single incremental payload, and I don't mean a single entry in the array. Multiple entries in the array is fine, but I mean just one follow-up payload effectively later in the stream that satisfies this whole query. So effectively you have the initial payload with the ABCD, and then you have another incremental which would have the A, B, D, E, F, potentially slow field A, potentially slow field A again, is it, or B? I forget. B, and the G and H, all of that as the data of one thing, and then potentially a couple of little follow-ups that say path route is now complete and path AB is now complete, something like that. That's what I'm interested in, because I think it would be easier on the client and often on the server if we can compress it down to that, but also allow the spec. The spec allows you to do it in the multiple steps if you want to, which can be, lower latency.
Yeah, so interesting thing. As far as I can tell, we will never receive empty data. It's a pro of this proposal that we will never receive data and complete true, just to like signalize that stuff is completed, because we force stuff on top level, and basically we reuse semantic of initial response. So if stuff is get matched on top level, you will not get defer in the first place on that point. So like in this case, to, you will not get in stuff that you described, you will not get entry in a pending for inner defer, because outer defers will take all the data, so you don't need to defer anything. It's actually a pro of its proposal. You will never need to send like data, empty data and complete it through.
How would the client know though? Because you were saying previously that the path only indicates that this particular level is complete and not any of the children.
But path is finishing, like if we go pending route. So and we need to go pending route. Otherwise, we don't know if initial, like if stuff get in line inside the initial payload, you don't know about it, right? To know.
Okay. So there are no pendings in the example that you've given, but you're saying that there should be pendings in there. Okay, that changes things, right? Yeah, thank you. I've caught up now.
Yeah, because I didn't want to make like, because right now we're going through pick and mix phase, and I wanted to present it as an orthogonal thing. Rob in top level issue, he also wanted, as far as I understand, separate stuff. So there is no pending in top level like initial comment. So that's why I didn't use it in my solution. So yeah, but it's assumed. I'm not sure about shape, and it's totally separate discussion. But yeah, some mechanism to signal why stuff is in line or not, we need it anyway for initial response. And if we have it for initial response, we have it for like everything else. And pending fits a bill for both, for inlining inside the initial response and for inlining in top level defer.
So we're over time, and I do have to run, but I will. I'm going to ask Michael and Matt if they have feedback on this proposal, and I think that we should try to implement it to see if there's anything that we're missing, and then we'll reconvene next week.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.